Protests and strikes against unpopular pension reforms are again gripping France. And one Canadian economist is highlighting just how difficult pension reform can be under the current program that he says is unsustainable. Many thousands of demonstrators are marching Tuesday, and the Eiffel Tower is closed. Fears that violence could mar the demonstrations prompted what Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin described as an unprecedented deployment of 13,000 officers. It is the latest round of nationwide demonstrations and strikes against unpopular pension reforms, and President Emmanuel Macron's push to raise France's legal retirement age from 62 to 64. However, according to Economist and Concordia University professor Dr. Moshe, pension reform has been an ongoing problem for France, and there may be potential solutions to it. Dr. Lander joins us now to give us his take on the situation. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Hello.
So we mentioned pension reform has been an ongoing issue in France for about 2 decades now, or over 2 decades. And we've seen many presidential candidates make promises to do just that. But how does Mr. Macron's pension program differ from the ones pitched by previous presidents?
I mean, each one that comes along says that they need to change the pension system, they need to raise the retirement age, they need to be less generous, they need to make sure that everybody is included within the pension. And generally speaking, it's always supported at an election, right? This is always a campaign issue. The problem is that when it comes time to implement it, it leads to riots and protests. And so the big difference this time is that with each successive president, it becomes more and more pressing. This is a ticking time bomb that cannot just be kicked down the road forever and ever. At some point, it has to be addressed, and just time is running out here. So, that's really the big difference. The devil in the details is almost immaterial at this point.
A ticking time bomb, indeed. Now, I want to touch on something really interesting you mentioned to me in a previous conversation, in that France's working population is increasingly foreign born and are not generating enough income to help finance the current system. Can you tell us a little bit more about why that's the case and whether that could potentially be a solution to France's current situation?
Sure. So France, like most countries, has what's called a pay-as-you-go system. So the idea here is that current workers pay for current retirees. And so all of us understand this in Canada. We see our CPP deductions. That's not going into an individual account for you or for me. That's going towards baby boomers that are retired right now. And so the problem is that if you're going to promise lavish pensions on retirees, then you and I have to pay big deductions to do it. If we have high paying jobs, then we can afford to have high paying deductions that can pay for that sort of thing. But if the jobs that we have are low paid, minimum wage, part time, and not stable employment, then it's very difficult to generate that income necessary to pay for retirees. And the problem is that, of course, every generation wants at least a lavish, if not more lavish, pension than the generation before it. So it's kind of hard to say that, sorry, we don't have the right workforce here to pay for those pensions. We're going to have to scale them back. That leads to protests.
Definitely, definitely. So on that note, are there some other options that French officials can consider in terms of addressing this other than raising the retirement age?
Well, I mean, they could be less generous with the pensions. They could just say, "I'm sorry, it's not in our funding opportunity to do that." They could raise taxes on existing workers, but again, you can imagine that's not going to be popular either. You could go to a different form of pension, which is called a fully funded system, and that is where you and I pay for yours and my pension, not for current retirees. That's an extremely difficult idea to transition to. If you started with it from scratch, it's maybe doable, but it requires a really heartless government to put its hands in its pockets and say, if you don't save enough, Nima, then you're never going to get a chance to retire. And if you're going to retire and you don't have enough money, we're not coming in to bail you out. You're just going to have to live on cat food. That type of thing is really, really heartless. And it's really difficult to put into place, again, without triggering protests and civil disobedience.
Definitely sounds like a very difficult situation for France. Now, just about a minute left here, but I really do want to bring this all back to Canada. As you mentioned, our pay as you go pension system. What are your thoughts on this? Do you see this being sustainable in the long run?
We always hear the story that CPP won't be there when you and I retire. And this is essentially what they're referring to. Now, the good thing about Canada is that it's much more welcoming of immigrants and it's increasingly foreign born. And those jobs that the foreigners are coming in are not taking menial, minimum wage paying jobs. They're moving up that income ladder. And so that's actually good for Canada then. And so as long as we maintain this idea of welcoming people into the country, this is always going to help to make things sustainable because the local population is not replenishing itself enough to make it a viable system. But if we look to foreigners to come here and contribute their fair share of taxes, we should be able to, continue this for at least a generation or two.
Well, sounds like some good news for Canada. Definitely have to watch the developing situation in France. Again, Dr. Lander, always great having you on Forum Daily. Thank you again for your time today.
Anytime.